So one of the key issues with regards to Labour's position on Israel in the Israel-Palestine conflict is the fact that in the run-up to the election, they made no clear statements on plans to stop arms sales to Israel, because these are being used to commit war crimes. And if you are selling states weapons they use to commit war crimes, you are also in breach of international law. And there's been lots of legal advice from when the Conservative Party were in government around what they were advised with regards to these weapon sales. The Commons has reopened properly, and so people are questioning the decisions of the government. And what I've got here is a few clips of some MPs being able to hold the government to account over the fact that they have not halted weapon sales to Israel yet. First up, we have the jam man himself, Jeremy Corbyn. We stand, the absolute boy. Let's see what he had to say in the Commons today to Keir Starmer.
If we are to follow the role of international law, whilst I'm pleased that he's called for a ceasefire in Gaza, surely it needs to go a bit further and call for the withdrawal of Israeli occupying forces in both Gaza and the West Bank, and an end to our complicity by the supplying of arms to Israel.
In relation to a ceasefire, look, the prospect of a ceasefire is there. I'm urging all parties to take that opportunity, which is an important foot in the door for the political process that I believe is the only process that's going to bring about lasting peace and resolution in the.
So how are you holding them to account? You had David Lammy going over there and shaking hands. Did you put any diplomatic pressure on them to acquiesce to a ceasefire? We know that it's been on the cards. Negotiators have continually put forward ceasefire proposals, but none of them are good enough for Netanyahu. How are you going to put pressure on him to accept something that he doesn't want to accept, especially when he knows that an end to the war means the end of him being Israeli Prime Minister? Next up on the list is Green MP for North Herefordshire. That's Ellie Chowns. We stand Ellie Chowns as one of our new Green MPs.
As a couple of honourable members have already emphasised, I would like to add my voices to the calls for the Foreign Secretary to commit to publishing the comprehensive review of Israel's compliance or non-compliance with international humanitarian law as soon as it is completed by officials. And I would like to ask the Foreign Secretary, through you, Mr Deputy Speaker, if he will in the meantime apply the precautionary principle and act to stop all UK arms exports to Israel, given that there is widespread evidence of considerable breaches of international law already. Thank you.
Well, I'm very grateful to the Honourable Lady's remarks, and I welcome her to the House representing North Herefordshire, I think, on behalf of the Green Party. Can I say to her that she will recognise, and I said in my remarks, that it is the case that this is one of the toughest neighbourhoods in the world, and Israel is a country surrounded by people who would see its annihilation. It is being attacked by the Houthis. It is being fired, missiles firing from Hezbollah, notwithstanding the desire for Hamas to wipe Israel off the map. For those reasons, it would not be right to have a blanket ban between our countries and Israel. What is right is for me to consider the issues in relation to offensive weapons in Gaza in the normal way, following the quasi-judicial process that I've outlined.
So again, no firm commitments there whatsoever. And I would just like to respond to David Lammy there saying, oh, well, they're surrounded by countries that would see them annihilated. All the more reason for them to commit to following international law in a way in which they're engaging in their ethnic cleansing campaign, for example. Turns out ethnic cleansing against international law, funny that, outside of even regular violations of international law, both in the way in which they've conducted every single military campaign of the last 40 years, whether it be in Lebanon, whether it be in Gaza, or indeed their continued occupation of the West Bank, which we now know from the ICJ ruling is explicitly in violation of international law, rather than implicitly, because everybody knew already when we were continually supplying them with diplomatic cover and weapons throughout that period. All the more reason to say, well, if you think you're going to be annihilated, Israel, maybe start obeying international law and we'll start actually continually selling you weapons. But until you stop doing your international law violations, you're on your own. The fact that David Lammy brings up the fact that they have hostile countries as neighbours should be all the more reason to make our support conditional. I don't believe we should support Israel regardless. But even if you are wanting to support Israel, but you do want to uphold international law, which you'd think that a party headed by somebody who is a human rights lawyer would want to be able to do so, you'd think that you would then use that leverage to ensure that any weapons that are sold are on the condition of following the ICJ's ruling on illegal occupation of Palestine. Maybe the international law violations are why they're hostile. Much to think about. Indeed, it's a real conundrum, isn't it? Maybe if they'd not, ethnically cleansed Palestinians for the last 75 years, maybe people might have a different opinion of them in the Middle East. It's funny that, isn't it? Although, to be fair, as Jim Speak points out, maybe I'm just ruling out the idea that maybe all the neighbours are just angry for no reason. They just hate Israel for no reason at all. Just entirely unjustified opposition to what Israel is doing. Yeah, they just, out of the blue, just said, we hate Israel for no reason. Maybe there's a historical reason for that. Just a thought. Next on the list is Liberal Democrat Munira Wilson, again discussing arms sales, but her point of view is even more important on this issue. And again, this is both independent, Green and Lib Dem MPs, all providing criticism of the Labour Party's position.
Liberal Democrats have long called for arms sales to Israel to be suspended whilst there are questions over their human rights record. As Shadow Foreign Secretary, he called on the then Conservative government to publish the legal advice they'd received on this matter. Will he commit to doing so now?
Well, the Honourable Lady will have heard what was just said to the member for Hammersmith and Fulham, although there may be boundary changes that means that I've got Chiswick. It's now changed. Hammersmith has gone more upmarket. It's Chiswick, forgive me. You'll understand as the member for Tottenham, I think I can get away with that. But in all seriousness, because it's a very serious point, I will seek to make my decision with full accountability and transparency.
So he didn't have any time to answer the question, but had plenty of time and opportunity to joke about Hammersmith boundaries. Because he got no answer to this question. It's a very real question of, you literally said when you were the opposition foreign secretary, right, the shadow foreign secretary, telling the government, publish your legal advice, tell us about the position in terms of whether or not we should be selling weapons to Israel. And now you're in government and you're saying, oh, well, I guess we'll just do it with some transparency. Well, okay, if you want to do transparency, commit to publishing the legal advice. Answer the question. Again, they can't answer the question because they think that they can get away with saying full transparency and then not doing it. And there is even, on top of the Lib Dems, the Greens and an independent, there is also a Labour MP here also asking about legal advice. Let's see what he had to say.
When will he publish the government's assessment of whether any parties have breached international law since the 7th of October and what the consequences of any such breaches should be?
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for that question, and I know that he has been a champion of the Palestinian cause and the Palestinian people in this House for many, many years indeed. He pushes me on an important subject. Can I say to him, and he's an esteemed lawyer, so he understands why I'm choosing my words carefully. This is a quasi-legal process, and it's important that I follow the actions in the appropriate way, with all probity and all integrity. So I will consider those assessments when they are made available to me. I instigated a process on the first day in office. I am supported, of course, in that by our Attorney General, and I hope to be able to make my views known with full accountability and transparency.
Again, the same answer that was given to Munira Wilson. And the thing is, he says, oh, well, we've not been given this advice yet. I will talk about it with transparency when it does happen. Whoa. Alicia Kearns has already said, as chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, she's already said explicitly in the leaked recording that the government have seen legal advice that says that Israel's breaking international law and we should stop the weapon sales. Did that advice just go away? Has that advice just disappeared into the ether? Has it been lost like a laptop on a train? We already know that this is the case, David. You can't just obfuscate and say, oh, well, we need to put together everything. I just did a thing on day one. That advice has already been given to the government. And again, it was very easy when the Conservatives were in government for them to publish the legal advice, or a summary of the legal advice at very least, about their decision to engage in airstrikes and Sana'a in Yemen against Houthi rebels in the area. And yet, when it comes to the legal advice which they must have sought regards to their arms licenses for exports to Israel, it's all about, oh no, we'll just have to wait and see. We'll have to wait until we get all of the reporting consulting in. You must have been given the legal advice already. Where's the review of the weapon sales? It's just not there. And again, we already know that Alicia Kearns was given the recommendation, or had seen recommendations, that the arms sale should be stopped. You must have access to what Alicia Kearns was told back then. You're in government now. You have access to all of the books. Why don't you publish that, or publish a summary of it? They won't do it because they want to tread a fine line in terms of continuing their support for arms exports to Israel, whilst also pretending that they care about Palestine. So again, some excellent opportunities here from Labour, Lib Dem, Green and Independent MPs holding Labour to account over this continuation of arms sales to a country that's engaging in an ethnic cleansing campaign in Palestine. And at no point did he ever give any sufficient answers to any of the questions, neither David Lammy nor Keir Starmer. So as you can see, we're going to be getting a lot of wishy-washy, non-committal nonsense from basically every single Labour minister. I'm looking forward to that, aren't you, chat? Really feels like the adults are back in the room, doesn't it? Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.